What if the secret to transforming workplace culture isn't in metrics, but instead it's in mastering the ripple effects of leadership? Meet Lisa Even, a leadership coach, keynote speaker, and author who believes that leaders should happen to their teams, not the other way around. With a background that spans from waitressing at a small town cafe to managing multi-million dollar budgets in corporate America, Lisa has experienced firsthand the challenges and triumphs of leadership. Her journey led her to develop the concept of the good ripple effect, emphasizing that every action, attitude, and decision can create positive disturbances that shape team culture and drive results. Through her book, Joy is My Job, and her podcast, Have Good Ripple Effect, Lisa shares insights on building intentional cultures that prioritize connection, accountability, and joy. Lisa's approach is not about adding more to leaders' plates, but instead about transforming how they show up and fostering environments where teams feel seen, heard, and valued. Her mission is clear: to empower leaders to create workplaces where joy and productivity coexist, leading to sustainable success. This is a story about redefining leadership, embracing authenticity, and understanding that the most impactful leaders are those who intentionally shape the ripples they send through their organizations. And before we hop into the podcast, a quick word from our sponsor, Deep Wealth and the Deep Wealth Mastery Program. We have William, a graduate of Deep Wealth Mastery, and he says, I didn't have the time for Deep Wealth Mastery, but I made the time and I'm glad I did. What I learned goes far beyond any other executive program or coach I've ever experienced. Or how about Bruce? Bruce says, before Deep Wealth Mastery, the challenge I had with most business programs, coaches, or books was that they were one dimensional. Through Deep Wealth Mastery, I'm part of a richer community of other successful business owners. The idea shared forever changed the trajectory of the business, and best of all, the experience was fun. And we'll round things out with Stacy. Stacy said, I wish I had access to the Deep Wealth Mastery before my liquidity event, as it would have been extremely helpful. Deep Wealth Mastery exceeded my expectations in terms of content and quality. And you know what, my Deep Wealth Nation, why they're saying this is because Deep Wealth Mastery, it's the only system based on a 9-figure deal. That was my deal. And as you know, I said no to a 7-figure offer, and I created a system that we now call Deep Wealth Mastery that helped myself and my business partners welcome from a different buyer, a different offer, a 9-figure exit. So if you're interested in growing your profits, preparing for a future liquidity event, if that's 2 years away or 20 years away, and you want to optimize your post-exit life, Deep Wealth Mastery is for you. Please email success@deepwealth.com. Again, that's success, SUCCESS, at deepwealth.com. We'll send you all the information about Deep Wealth Mastery, otherwise known as Scale for Ultimate Sale. That's where you want to be. You want to be with other successful business owners, entrepreneurs, and founders just like you who are looking to create market disruptions, and they want to lock in their financial freedom and have success and fulfillment. That's the 90-day Deep Wealth Mastery Program. It has your name on it. All you need to do is take the next step. Send an email to success@deepwealth.com. Welcome to the Deep Wealth Podcast. Deep Wealth Nation, let me ask you something. When it comes to you, your leadership team, are you exactly where you want to be? Or are you saying we're okay, but we could be better? We're good, but we could be great. And I don't know about you, but as an entrepreneur, I struggle with that every day when I'm running my companies. Guess what? I have a fellow entrepreneur, a thought leader, an author, a fellow podcaster who's going to answer your questions and more. You're going to love this episode. So Lisa, welcome to the Deep Wealth Podcast. An absolute pleasure to have you with us. There's always a story behind the story. Lisa, what's your story? What got you from where you were to where you are today?
I love this question because it's probably one of my favorites to answer. When I was in high school, I had a internship because they made you do it. They made you have one. And I was paired with a woman named Brenda, and Brenda changed my entire life. And when I think about one human in a period of about 5 minutes, she really did have the biggest and best ripple effect that I could have dreamed to have. And my tagline is have good ripple effect. And what Brenda did for me, I grew up in a small town in Iowa. If you're familiar, it's like 6 hours west of Chicago. And college wasn't a guarantee for me. It was expensive, and my dad is a very pragmatic human, a really smart human, and he said, I'm just not sure that you should take a loan for a piece of paper. I don't know if that's going to guarantee you a job. And in our town at that time, what would I do with that? And in this internship, this woman named Brenda, one afternoon says to me, Lisa, where are you going to college? And I looked at her and I said, Brenda, we don't pay for a piece of paper in our family. Like it's really expensive. And she looked at me and she goes, yeah, but do you want to? And I said, yes. And I tell you what, to have someone believe in you before you thought it was possible, and to then say, I can help you figure that out. She did a lot to help me think about where I should go, why I should go, what I would do when I got there. I kind of credit that to being one of the first big ripple effects in my life. That's what led me to go and see the world and do things. And here we are today.
Lisa, as you're talking about that, it reminds me something we all take for granted. How, in your case, I love how there is this one individual who forever changed your trajectory, really
Yeah.
out of kindness and made a difference. In Deep Wealth Nation, how many opportunities do we have? And are you taking that opportunity, life's opportunity, where it might be a passing comment, even to a stranger that you don't know, but those kind words, that encouragement can make all the difference. And we've had guests on the Deep Wealth podcast that have shared their story of how someone they didn't even know. It was maybe a 10-second comment, an acknowledgement, a recognition,
Yes.
and it put them on the right path. So that got you going. Now, the area that you're in, what I love about that, Lisa, here at Deep Wealth, when we're talking about leadership and mindset and culture, my goodness, that's a lot of the Deep Wealth 9-step roadmap. We're talking about step 2, X factors. That's where leadership comes in. That's where culture comes in. Step 5, a winning mindset. That's where we focus all on that. And a lot of these are not showing up on a balance sheet. They're not showing up on profit and loss. And it's somewhat of an unfair question I'm going to ask you, because you would be absolutely correct to say, Jeffrey, every company, every entrepreneur, every leader, him or her, they are unique on their journey, and what they're doing is specific to them. But that said, let's pull back for a moment. A 50,000 foot in the air overview. Are there patterns that you're seeing? Is it good old Pareto's law, the 80-20 rule that, hey, Jeffrey, yeah, 20% of these actions or inactions are creating 80% of the problems, really opportunities in disguise for most companies. What are you seeing out there?
I would say probably two things. Number one, I often tell a story about how I had an employee who looked at me, and in passing, we were kind of standing, just to give you a sense of what the situation looked like. I worked in healthcare. So we were in a very large hospital in a clinic within that hospital. We're standing there. We have a number of people that walk through our office on a day-to-day basis. Some of them are the doctors that we work with. And one of our doctors walked through and she looked adorably disheveled, like mad scientist, papers going everywhere. And her hair was a little bit like in a tussle. And this employee that I'm standing next to just says, Dr. So and so is the cutest. She always shows up just half disheveled. That kind of sparked a conversation with the 3 or 4 of us that were standing there of like, well, how do we show up? And I was the leader of this team. So I kind of kept quiet, right? Like I'm just listening to them talk about how each other shows up. And they turn to each other and they're like, you show up like this. And then without skipping a beat, Haley turns to me and she goes, you show up busy. And I
Whoa.
remember thinking to myself, I am so fun and I am energetic. I am not busy, am I? And I kind of laughed my way through the interaction of, oh, ha. But I walked back to my office, kind of just like replaying that moment of, I show up busy. Am I busy? And really, after a couple of days of probably a little bit of pouting and like silent reflection, I realized she was right. I was showing up in a way that was busy and in a hurry and very much like skip the people part, just get it done. And I started to look around my team and think, oh, me telling them how busy I am on behalf of them is actually not getting me the result that I want. And I
Hmm.
think sometimes as leaders, especially as entrepreneurs, we wear all the hats
Hmm.
and we want to make sure like even our small teams know like, well, I'm busy, but I'm working on the thing that's going to really get us to the next level. And we think that showing up in that way is going to give us results, but it's not. And I had to really kind of pull that back to kind of be like, okay, what if I can be busy and think about how I'm showing up in particular moments? And I think that's one of the small keys that we often forget to, I always say, present is the present, right? Like your
Yeah.
presence is the present. And so that's probably one of the things that I would say. The other one is probably a little bit around this idea of are you able to analyze like the environment around you? The tip or the tool that I often talk with teams and organizations about are these three things: attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs. And if you're able to scan your environment and say, what's the attitude, almost like taking a temperature check, what are our behaviors, the ones that we want and the ones that we don't want? Like the things that we need to get rid of, like complaining or, what have you. I had a nurse, she was brand new to the team about 2 weeks in, because I was a leader of leaders. I would meet with our frontline team members and I would say to them, you have the freshest eyes. Like, what's the most odd or interesting thing that you've noticed? And she looked at me and she goes, do we take a lunch? I'm like, and I laughed. I knew what she meant because there was this really unique behavior with a subset of people
Hmm.
where they were very much, they work through lunch. They always get it done. They're like always doing the thing. And she looked at me and she goes, I laughed. I said, well, HR would like me to tell you, yes, please take a lunch. And then she laughed and she goes, I think if they took a lunch, they might be nicer humans. And I said, yeah, I bet you're right. And we talked about what are some interesting behaviors that occur on a team. They're not written in a handbook. They're not on our official portals, but what are those odd behaviors that we do? If you can start to pinpoint them, you can kind of say like, is that good ripple effect? Is that what we want? And then that third one is really the beliefs. What do we believe as an organization? Do we believe, oh, it's always going to be like this? So I would say those are the two things of scanning your environment and really being very intentional and tactical with how you're showing up. Now, I know that's a lot.
Oh my goodness. There's so much there to
It's so
unpack.
much.
Before I get going, Deep Wealth Nation, please go to the show notes because in there we have a link to Lisa's books. And so click on them, buy them, get them. Joy is My Job, a book to spark joy-filled mindsets. And then your upcoming one, which is What's My Ripple Effect? And so Deep Wealth Nation, go there, click on the links, go get them. Lisa, you unravel one of my questions. You say leaders should happen to their teams, not the other way around. And you began to explain that. And I can now see where that came from,
Yeah.
where you had that one comment. And I got to tell you, as you're talking about that, you're actually bringing me back to my very early days as an entrepreneur. And I was just oblivious to everything else around me. I've got to get to this finish line. I'm going to wake up early, go to bed late. Nothing else matters. And as I look back on that now, and fortunately, I stopped mid tracks, and there's a whole other story behind the story on that one. But I realized, hey, that's not the right way to do it. And there's a
Yeah.
high cost to getting that. You're going to win the battle, as they say, but you're going to lose the war in what you're giving up on that. So talk to us because I know I'm not alone, and it sounds like you were going through some of that as well. Whereas leaders, it's so easy. We're doing what we're told. Hey, keep the eye on the prize, but we're losing our eye on everything else. So what's going on
Yeah.
with that?
One of my favorite ways to look at it, which we all kind of laugh because we're like, well, that's not my favorite, is when you want to lose weight, right? You want to lose weight. There are a lot of things that you do to get there, whether it's diet or exercise or just like eating smaller portions. And I always say, keep your eye on those activities before the result. They call them like process outcomes and instead of like true outcomes. And if you can start to think about your team and the different hats that you're wearing, almost as if diet and exercise in smaller portions, if you then insert those things of how much time am I spending being the measurer of things? How much time am I spending being a connector to my team? How much time am I spending coaching or mentoring? I have a number of different, like almost personas, I call them, that I think about. Are you wearing different hats throughout the day? And if the answer is no, I'm just really concerned with about the measurement of things, or I spend most of my day as the cheerleader. Sometimes I'm like, you might have your percentages just a bit off. You might have to
Mhm.
tweak that just a little bit and at least for me, I have to remind myself, like, I need to spend a little time small talking because
Yeah.
people, like, they're not going to do the things that I need them to do without them knowing, liking, and trusting me. And so
Yeah.
it's almost like if you're I would say like I'm a bubbly numbers person. So if I can kind of think about it in relation to, okay, well, about 25% of my time, I want to be able to say that I'm coaching, and about 15% of my time, I want to be measuring things. And then, what are those other percentages of like, I need to make time for the small talk? And those ultimately are like diet and exercise. They will get you the KPI results, or even to the end of the year when you look at that, your balance sheet, and you're like, okay, yep, we're there.
And as you're talking about that, there's so much that we can learn as entrepreneurs from the military, from the services,
Yeah.
because I've had former service people on the podcast, and they all say the same thing, Jeffrey. Before I can have my team be really effective and on the battlefield is life or death, this is not a,
Mm.
they've got to trust me.
Yeah.
And just because I happen to have a title after my name, it doesn't mean that they respect me. It doesn't mean that they trust me. And to what you're saying, Lisa, they say, hey, I've got to know who they are as a person,
Yeah.
what's going on in their life, their families, what's keeping them up at nights, that they're excited or they're
Yeah.
feeling sad or stressed. And I know for myself in the early years as being a leader, I didn't understand that. I didn't realize that I would give myself a failing grade on all those areas because it was, hey, Jane, you're here. Just do your job. I don't want to hear about anything else. Just tell me what's going on in the company and when we're going to get there and what we need to do. Whereas Jane may be having all kinds of things on the personal side that I wasn't the best of leaders or the nicest of people.
Yeah.
Learned from that. It took me
We've
too
been
long to
there.
learn
We've
from
all been
that.
there.
But it's so important. And it also goes to what you really talk about in your book. So let's talk about joy is my job. And I love how you put that into the three different areas. So part one, you talk all about mindset, and it's a choice,
Mhm.
as is so many things in life. And then once you get us all firmed up with the mindset, okay, now that you know that joy is a mindset, here are some barriers, the excuses that we tell ourselves, the Kool-Aid that we drink our own
Yeah.
Kool-Aid. Here's the barriers to joy. And then part three, you go into the framework and you have your four steps of what you're
Yeah.
talking about there. And you can share on base or off base. One of my big takeaways from this was when I show up as a leader, if I'm miserable on the inside, if my personal
Hmm.
life just isn't working out, it's not panning out, I'm not happy there, it's going to spill over. I'm not going to be joy. I'm going to be angry,
Yeah.
sad, something else, and that spills over. So if I'm looking to my team to step up and be joy and go through the joy framework, I've got to lead the change. As the saying goes, I need to be the change that I want to see in the people around me. How am I doing with that?
Yeah, 1,000%. And I think, sometimes people are like, okay, so you talk a lot about leadership and team culture, and you also talk about joy. And I'm like, yeah, I do. And even in my one-on-ones with team members, there's a download on my website that you can grab. It's called the PB&J worksheet. And I use that in the one-on-ones with my teams because I want to know, first of all, their P's, which is like, how are they doing? What's their perspective? How's their personal life? I want to know about their progress of how they're doing just in general. The B is really, I want to gather better ways of doing things. I don't know about you, but sometimes when you ask someone, they're like, "Oh yeah, that's been broken forever," or "Oh yeah, that's a mess. Like we should have fixed it." If you stop to ask them, like, "Is there a better way?" They can usually give it. It's just a matter of being like, "Oh, I need to ask them that question." But then that
Mhm.
third one, the J, is really the joy. I want to know from them what are they enjoying these days, whether it's work or personal life, because you said, as you know, it spills over into both areas. And my joy journey really started kind of, I would say, like, it's not sunshine and rainbows. It actually started when my husband and I were slightly miserable. I came home one night, I was sitting on the couch and I looked at him and I said, I'm exhausted. We are overscheduled and underwhelmed, and we measure and put everything on our calendar. Like I look at our calendar and all I see is like when to change the furnace filter, and we have to go to the house, and I've got work meetings. And I said, in healthcare, because my husband works in healthcare too, I said, you know how we measure everything? When you go to the doctor, we weigh you, we're checking your pulse, we're asking you a ton of questions, we're measuring all these things. And he looked at me like, yeah. And I said, I want to look at my calendar and I want to measure something other than the responsibilities that we have to do. And he goes, okay, well, what are we talking about? And I said, I don't know. I feel like we need to measure like fun and joy. And I don't know. We need to make joy our job. Just like we would make our real jobs our jobs, we need some more joy. And he's like, okay, well, how do we do it? I said to him, I'm not sure, but give me a few days. I went to Home Depot. I bought a giant whiteboard and I brought it home and I was like, can you hang this next to our bed? People don't have whiteboards in their bedrooms. What? And I was like, yeah, I would love to have this whiteboard right next to our bed because I want to dream about and make a list of the things that could bring us joy, have brought us joy in the past, could do, want to do, hope to do things. And I said, the only time we're sometimes together is before we fall asleep. I want to add things to this whiteboard as we're laying there. And then I want to go to sleep. And the next morning, when we are fresh, I want to add to this list. And it really was like a personal experiment that turned into kind of our own movement as a family.
Mhm.
It moved from a whiteboard onto our calendars, and now we track our joy like a bank account. So we sit down once a month, usually with a glass of wine, and we look at our calendar and we say, do we have enough joy? And it is the most fun thing we've ever done. And so in the book, I talk about the things that we tell ourselves, like, oh, I can't really have joy right now because I have to wait till this project is done. Or I can't have joy right now because I need to wait till my kids sleep through the night. What are those things that we're telling ourselves? And then how do you kind of shift to say, joy is my job. If I don't add joy to the calendar now, like I might be waiting forever for it to just show up at my door. And so I think there's this really nice, almost like complementary things of thinking about how are you showing up at work? How are you looking at your team culture? And then how are you having some joy, both personally and professionally? If you don't have a joy calendar, you need one.
I love that. A joy
It's,
calendar.
it's so fun.
And let me ask you this, because I know there's going to be people that are thinking, yeah, hey, Lisa, I hear you, and it sounds like a great story. That said, if I put joy into the workplace, sure, everyone's going to be happy, but we're going to go out of business. Nothing's going to
Yeah.
get done. Everyone's going to be
Yeah.
playing fun and games. I'm going to date myself a little bit here, Lisa. I mean, if you go back to the .com, what I call the .bomb era, you had all kinds of joy in the workplace, all these different services and these really funky workspaces. But ultimately, those companies ran into problems and
Yeah.
they took their eye off the ball and productivity went down. So, how do we have joy in the workplace and ensure that we're not only meeting, but we're exceeding our KPIs, our key performance
Oh,
indicators, our
absolutely.
goals? We're hitting it out of the park. How do we combine both?
There's a couple of different ways. So, some of it is really teaching your teams about the concept of that I call crappy to happy. So, we do many crappy things throughout our day, non unglamorous things, whether it's Excel spreadsheets. In construction, it's carrying drywall. I usually will say to my team, okay, what's the most unglamorous thing that you do? I worked in healthcare before patient phone calls were automated. So
Mhm.
for some of my team members, making patient phone calls, they would have hundreds, if not thousands of phone calls to make each month. And so I would go up to them and I would say, hey, how's it going today? And I was doing a little bit of rounding, and you can do this virtually too. But I would walk up to them and I'd say, hey, crappy to happy, what do we got? And they're like, Lisa, we got 600 phone calls. And I'm like, whew, that's a lot of phone calls. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, all right, that's the crappy. But what's the happy? What are we going to do before, during, or after to those 5-10 minute things to just take ourselves and remind ourselves that, okay, we have a lot of crappy things, but like, where's the happy? And so for them, a lot of times it was like, all right, I'm going to make it up. 80 phone calls and then I'm going to walk around the building, or I'm going to make 80 phone calls and I'm going to order some Starbucks. And really just thinking about this idea of how do you take something that you don't love to do and you say to yourself, I do it anyway. I had a C-suite executive walk over to me after one of my presentations, and she says to me, Joy, huh? And she kind of looked me up and down. And in my mind, I'm thinking, you either loved it or you hated it. I don't know. And she says, hey, you know that crappy to happy thing? She goes, I know we were talking more in a work setting, but she goes, my mom is in an assisted living facility. And I said, oh, okay. And she goes, crappy to happy. She goes, honestly, I hate visiting her because we sit there and we just stare at the walls and I don't know what to say to her. But I think that I need to approach it in a different way, crappy to happy. She goes, next time I'm bringing a board game. She goes, we used to play board games when we were little all of the time. And I was like, exactly. It's like that 1% mind shift to kind of say, like, what does it look like for us to make sure that we are getting things done, but also enjoying it just a bit, and whether it's teeny tiny engagement sort of activities. The
Mhm.
other thing I will often say is to my teams, I'm like, not everybody's going to love this. My
Mhm.
joy and your joy are so different. When I think once a month, I sit down with my husband and I watch like a football game, and
Mhm.
my only job in that moment is to enjoy his joy. He's like, did you see that guy? He had 40 rushing yards for whatever. And I'm like, oh, I saw it. And it's the same at work. Some of the engagement activities that we do, or some of the things that we will consider joyful, some people, I say, permission granted to not claim that as your joy. And as soon as you kind of say that to folks, especially your older generations that maybe were like, we just show up and do our thing. As soon as you say to them, that's not for you, they're like, oh, thank goodness. And so it's really just teaching people about this idea of don't wait forever, find ways to infuse it in small doses, and realize that sometimes joy is going to look different based on the person.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say, and again, Jeffrey, on base, off base, is first you're acknowledging, yeah, Jeffrey, this is just a crappy situation. This is not great. I get it. It's no fun. It's tedious. It's boring. So you're acknowledging it. You're
Yeah.
empathizing with them. And it sounds as though, on the one hand, looking from the outside in, why would we want to do that? Because now we're encouraging them to say, yeah, you're right. And maybe you shouldn't be doing this or find some excuses. But it's almost like you're giving, or not almost like you're giving them permission. Yeah, it's okay to feel that way because
Yes.
it's not great. And yeah, it is boring. And yes, it is tedious. But then you're going to really transform that because you're saying, okay, how are we going to put some joy into this and have
Mhm.
them think of it in another way? And so, from that perspective, Lisa, walk us through your process. So, imagine now I'm a company and okay, Lisa, I want you to give a keynote to my entire team. And then
Yes.
I want you to advise my leadership team of where we are now and how we're going to go from here to there. What's your secret sauce? What's the method to your madness? And I say that under the proviso, Lisa, yeah, you're right. You don't even have to say it. Jeffrey, every company's different. They're all on their own unique path. It's not a
Yeah.
one size fits all. I get that. But generally speaking, what's the method to your madness? What are you doing here?
Yeah, so usually in a keynote related to joy, we will talk a lot about why is it necessary. We'll talk about some of the science behind it because as you know, it's not fluff. It's actually there's quite a bit of science around that. And then I'll ask some almost like hypothetical questions of I can imagine that there are people on your teams and we really kind of skirt the conversation whether it's burnout or exhaustion or morale. Because some people, I would say, like they describe their symptoms a little bit differently. Like we've got people, just kind of not great morale. Things are a little bit toxic. We've got folks that, are burnt out. They're overwhelmed. Like those are the symptoms that I often hear when someone reaches out. And then they say, like, I think we just need a little bit of a boost. And so when we start that conversation, we're talking about the science of joy.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk a little bit about the challenges related to joy
Mm-hmm.
in the workplace,
Mm-hmm.
like what gets in our way. And so they get to make a list of the things that kind of gets in their way, whether it's emails or deadlines, what have you. And then we'll start to talk about desire, permission, and belief. So thinking about this team of are they in a space where they desire it? I had a woman raise her hand at a presentation once, and it was probably my favorite moment.
Mm-hmm.
She raises her hand and she says, I have enough joy. Thanks. And it was like, it was so perfect as a keynote speaker, at least for
Uh-huh.
me, those real life things.
Uh-huh.
I looked at her and I said, yeah, if you have enough joy, you're right. If you don't desire more or you don't desire it at all, yeah, yes. And then we talked a little bit about what does it look like for permission, going back to the hats that you wear each day. If
Mm-hmm.
your team doesn't have a way or language around this idea of being able to have a little fun at work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if we're
Mm-hmm.
wearing that measurer hat, Lisa, you show up busy, right? If you aren't creating a little bit of space for people to have, we started our morning meeting off with a joke every day
Mm-hmm.
because it was like one of those things where, some people will say, well, if we're not laughing, we're crying. And it's like, I want to give you just the tiniest bit of permission to have a little fun
Mm-hmm.
because I know that you're going to work harder. And I would say to them, I'm like, we work hard, but we also play hard, do we not? And my team knew, and a lot of leaders would call me and say, what's your secret sauce? And I'm like, we work hard and we play hard. That's an
Mm-hmm.
expectation of our team. And so if we looked at our monthly calendar and there wasn't something small and fun coming up, it was like, what are we really doing here? We spend 90,000 hours in the workplace. And so I think it really comes down to that like desire, permission, and then belief. It was really changing our team's beliefs to say, we work hard and we play hard. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
worked in a neurosciences department. So when you think about the patients that were coming into our space, most of our patients were dying, were going to receive a diagnosis that they had something awful that was happening to them, brain tumor, cancer, you name it. And so when it comes to the actual emotional workload of our team, not even the workload, but the emotional load, it was high. And so I would say to them, if we are going to be our best in an area that is really hard and really challenging day to day, we have to find 3 to 5 minutes here and there to enjoy it. And so it was really this conversation around that. And I think if you're someone that's thinking about, okay, well, how the heck do I do it? I say, first off, is there any joy on the calendar? Look at your team and think about, is there any joy? Now, again, I'm going to tell a really quick story about a gentleman on my team to give you a sense. Big silver bushy hair, big silver mustache, older. And every morning I would come into the office and I would say, "Good morning, Paul. How are you?" And Paul, in this growly voice, would say, "Good morning, Lisa. I'm 2 years and sunny." And I'm like, 2 years and sunny? I don't know what that is. And I was telling another leader about it. And I was also telling him, like, hey, I got this guy. We do this thing every day. He says 2 years and sunny. And he is driving me absolutely bonkers with our potlucks, like our engagement activities. He will be at the potluck with a plate in hand being like, "I hate the potlucks, da 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 da. Like, I don't know why we do these." No, it was funny because right around the same time, my husband and I were making Joy our job. And so we had decided to go on a trip. And I
Mhm.
said to him, "I want to go on a trip. I don't want to plan it." So you can imagine, we literally we convinced a friend couple, we booked our tickets to wherever we could go that was within our budget a few days before. So we got to Sweden. And we heard that you could take an overnight ferry to Finland. So we end up on this boat, and the woman at the top of the boat solved all of my Paul problems, like all of them. Because that leader that I was talking to back at home, he's like, "I don't know what to do about the potluck." He goes, "But I think when Paul says 2 years and sunny, he's talking about his retirement forecast." Now, before I left for this trip, I didn't have a chance to talk to Paul, but I get
Uh-huh.
on this ship, and the woman at the top of the ship says, "Welcome aboard." And she's pointing out all the amenities on this ship.
Uh-huh.
She's like, "Live entertainment, casinos." And my girlfriend and I are like, "Live entertainment." Our spouses are like, "Casinos." And we're like fake bickering at the top of this ship. And this is the part where the woman like solves all my Paul problems. She turns to us and she goes, "Time out. Let me tell you something. Not everything is for everyone. Okay. Not everything is for everyone, but we've got something for everyone on the ship. So you two live entertainment, you two casinos, welcome aboard." And I walked away from her just kind of looking at her like, huh. I got back to the office. I went over to Paul and I was like, "Good morning, Paul. How are you?" And he's like, "Good morning, Lisa. I'm 2 years and sunny." And I said, "Hey, Paul, are you retiring in 2 years?" And he kind of looked at me and he goes, "Maybe." I said, "Paul, we got to talk about these potlucks." And he's, "I hate the potlucks," right? He goes back into his spiel. I just waited out. And then at the end, I said, "Paul, you are 2 years and sunny. I got people over here 40 years and cloudy, my friend. 40 years they got left in the workplace." I said, "These potlucks, they're not for you. So could you not hate the potluck at the potluck?" And he kind of looked at me like, "Huh," you know, and I'm like, "Okay, good day, Paul. Bye." I walk away. I'm in my office a few weeks later. Somebody comes running down the hall and she comes to my office. She goes, "You'll never believe who brought a dish to potluck." And I kind of looked and I said, "Was it Paul?" She goes, "How'd you know?" I went up to Paul at potluck and I said, "Hey, did you bring a dish to potluck?" And he goes, "Oh, it's for the kids." And I smiled and I kind of like, arm to arm, I was like, that's right. When you give people permission to have a little bit of joy, but also to have joy in their own way, and to even explain the why behind it, like, we need joy, guys. We need joy. It's going to look different for each person. It really does a lot for people's like internal regulation systems of, all right, they're not trying to pull one over on me and it's not for me, or it is for me. Now I know why. It's a really powerful tool. My employees would do about anything for me because I made sure that we were working hard and we were playing hard.
Okay, my goodness. So, love that example and what you're sharing of how you became curious, you went behind the scenes, you related, you
Mhm.
shared in a respectful way what was on your mind. And lo and behold, wow, Paul reciprocated and he
You did.
heard you. He felt listened, he felt heard, and off you went in changing something that probably otherwise, hey, Paul, come here, unacceptable what you're doing. You
Yeah.
can't say that. You can't be like that. And we're creating some more resentment. So, Lisa, as you're talking about that, you had me wondering, and we're not in wrap up mode, there's still more to go, but I want to ask this question now. Coming out of this episode, if there was one action that a listener in the Deep Wealth Nation could take right now before they go to their next meeting, their next activity, whatever business or personal thing that they're going to be doing after this episode, what could be one thing that they do that really moves the dial? Maybe it's even a low hanging fruit. It takes 30
Yeah.
seconds from their time, doesn't cost any money. And it's back to the joy framework, whatever it is. What would be one strategy that you're
I would
recommending?
give, and I think it's a maybe almost a strategy that will, in essence, create a little bit more joy down the road, but it's a little
Uh-huh.
bit more on the, I would love for folks to be just a little bit more curious. And when I say that, I want them to ask people focused questions. I would say, like, try on other people's glasses and see what they see for a minute. And the way that I do that, there's a really great YouTube video. It's old from Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian. And he says, I do a show. I'm like, thanks so much. Have a great night. He gets down from the stage and then people line up to talk to him. And he's like, what do I say? 200 strangers. And he gives a really great tip in that. And I think this is a really good like thing that you can carry. I do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
As he says, I ask people specific, if you want to get real meat out of people, if I ask you a generic, hi, how are you? We all lie and we're like, we're good. But he says, the person comes up and he says, where are you from? They tell him, make it up, Iowa. There's a lot of corn there, isn't there? And they're like, yeah, a lot of corn. Is it hot there? And he kind of follows the trail of asking very specific questions because people can give specific answers back. And then the thing I like to do following that is I like to ask preference questions because as you open up a conversation around whatever it is, then I follow it up with, oh, you said it's hot there. Do you like the heat? And then they tell you their whole life story. And so asking very people focused questions to get kind of their perspective and ask very specific. Have you ever been skiing? No, I've never been skiing because my brother hurt his knee and da 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 da. Like they start to open up their suitcase a bit of like, they tell you all the things that you need to know. It just takes a matter of being specific and then follow that up a couple of questions later about preference.
So, Lisa, as you're talking about that, can you validate if what I'm thinking is on track or not on track?
Yeah.
And people aren't stupid and they know that you're asking these general questions and perhaps even know it's in a setting where you're going to be asking those questions because that's just what you do.
Yeah.
But even though they know that, it seems as though, and I've been there myself when this has happened, they really appreciate that because they're saying, hey, Lisa didn't have to ask me that question. Lisa didn't have to take the time to learn a little bit about me. Yeah, and I know it was that kind of environment where that's what's expected. But I really appreciate what Lisa did. And I really respect her. I really like what Lisa's all about and what she represents and what she's doing, as opposed to what you're sharing before, just the canned stuff of, hey, Jeffrey, nice to see you. I hope you enjoyed your time. Have a great day. You're taking hey, Jeffrey, where are you from? Where'd you come from today? Oh, yeah. I hear it's hot there. There's lots of corn there. That you're doing your best to personalize that. You're at least trying. How am I doing with that?
You got it. And I think the other part too is the first time you do it, especially with your team or even like customers or clients, they're going to be slightly thrown off because it's not common. It's really not common for people to ask other people like a little bit more like specific questions, but they walk away feeling like that interaction mattered. And you hit it right on the head of, oh, I respect her. And as you do it with your team, they're going to start to give you all the insight into what they care about, what they like, what they don't like, what they want to do more of or less of. And it really is almost like if you were building employee profiles, you're going to have all of the answers that you need if you start to ask some fairly specific questions. Have you ever been to Denver? No, da 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 da. And then they're like, my old boss at my old job, he was from Denver. You can start to kind of wiggle your way into understanding people a lot more if you follow that specific questions. And maybe you have to start with a general, hey, how are you today? And then you dive into, what's one thing that, is on your to-do list today? And they're like, I got 47,000 things. Now you're into like, oh, let's talk about that. And it really does give you permission to pivot into those conversations.
And Lisa, what's interesting as you're talking about that, I'm actually going back. This is going back yet a ways away. I'm going to date myself again here. I was with a friend and we're at an event and my friend met President Clinton. He was no longer president. He was on the touring circuit. And my friend's not even a Democrat, but he walked away because Clinton took the time and asked some questions, exactly what you said. And my friend, he was like a little schoolboy. He was all giddy. Hey, can you believe he asked me this? And we're talking about that. And he knew that Clinton, that's what he does. And that's kind of his MO and everything. But he experienced it in the first person and walked away. Wow, what an amazing guy.
Yeah.
And it works, even though he knew, well, yeah, this is what Clinton's going to do.
Yeah.
And I don't even agree with his politics per se, but walked away a raving fan.
Yeah. And I think that's I love the like raving fan like mention because I think you'll be surprised at what people will then share later. Oh, I was telling my friend about you and, this and that. And I'm like, who would have guessed me just taking a moment to not be busy and to ask you a few things, what that would create from a ripple effect standpoint later.
And so let me ask you this, and you actually talk about this in part 3, the Joy Framework, where you talk about, I'm not in the mood. And I know that resonates with me so much because as a leader, you know what?
Yeah.
Everything eventually falls back into my lap. And hey, I take responsibility. The buck stops with me, as they say. And I know
Hmm.
there are some days where mentally, physically, it's just exhausting.
Yes.
Dealing with situations that I don't want to deal with, but I need to deal with them. I want to deal with
Hmm.
them. And the list is just endless. And at the end of the day, I am just feeling so depleted. And it would be all too easy. And I've done it. Yeah, I'm just not in the mood. Joy is not happening today. It's just
Yeah,
nowhere to
exactly.
be found. Joy is MIA. So, with that in mind, because as entrepreneurs, we can be burning the candle at both ends and not looking after ourselves. You talk about that for someone who hasn't yet read your book. And again, Deep Health Nation, go to the show notes, click on the link, pick up both books. What would you want us to know, Lisa, in terms of how do I bring joy back into my day when it's one of those days where it's anything but joy?
Yeah. I think that, one of the funny things, and I wish I could have like my inner dialogue because I feel like I do have a lot of Lisa, do this and Lisa, do that. I feel like my inner dialogue, I wish I could just put it out there for you to hear, but I think about it kind of in the like, in almost a like with a little bit of levity of, yep, today is just one of those days. And I kind of almost laugh at it of if I could zoom out and be a fly on the wall to this moment, I would just be like arms crossed, shaking my head, being like, can you believe it? And I think for me that like just little tiny mention of this is in fact crazy. Like that, whoa, look at this. And kind of a moment of shaking, nodding, laughing. And then from that standpoint, I often say, what if it was just 5 minutes? If I, because I'm so busy, it was one of those days, it was awful. What could I do if I had 5 minutes of time to just make it a little bit more joyful? And that's a lot of times what I do. I can walk around. There's like a road in my neighborhood that I can walk around in like almost 12 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I literally sometimes when I'm just having a day, I'm like, well, it's time to walk around the pond. And it doesn't have to be big, but it's almost like a trick for your brain of resetting the settings of like, you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to do it small. And it's going to be a game changer. I have a friend, he texts me and he's like, hey, you remember how you had me do that 5 minutes of joy thing? And I said, yeah. He goes, do you want to know what my 5 minutes of joy are? I said, yes. And he's like, every morning I brew a pot of coffee. And he goes, I used to start the coffee pot, walk away, go get ready. He goes, now I stand there and I watch it brew. And he goes, it tells my brain like it's going to be a good day. Like, look at this jet fuel, all for me. And so I think it's a matter of really building that muscle of saying, start small, look for moments that you can squeeze it in, and it doesn't have to be big.
Okay. So, what I'm hearing you say is number one, give yourself a break. And you talk about this, give yourself a
Yes.
break. And it's okay to say, yeah, this is just not the best situation that you're in, or this is not fun, or yeah, this really sucks. So give yourself permission to feel that. And then what I'm also hearing you say is, can you find even 5 minutes?
Yep.
Everyone has 5 minutes during the day. Can you give yourself 5 minutes to find some joy, something that makes you smile? Maybe it's brewing some coffee. Maybe it's taking a 12-minute walk around the block in your case, Lisa.
Yes.
Whatever it's going to be, 5 minutes just to unwind, forget, go into another world, experience that joy. Actually, as you're talking about that, almost reminds me when I meditate. I can be having
Yeah.
a really tough or challenging day. It's only 20 minutes, but I tell you, Lisa, coming out of it, it feels like I had 8 hours of sleep
Yeah.
and I'm
You're a new
recharged, I'm
human.
revived. Okay, bring it on, let's go. And it sounds like it's something very similar to that in terms of, hey, whatever turns your crank,
Yeah.
do that. We're not saying take the entire day off, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is, take some time out, get that joy inside of us. And I don't want to assume, and you can confirm it for us, it also sounds as though what you're saying, hey, when we take care of ourselves first, even though other people may criticize it from the outside or you're being selfish. What? Jeffrey, you're taking 20 minutes for yourself today when so much other
Yeah.
things are going on. But when I take care of myself, I'm now in a position to take care of everyone else and not the other way around.
Absolutely. We had a house fire due to lightning, and I actually tell the story in the book. And when you have a fire, all of your belongings are wet and they are full of soot. And depending on your insurance, they take the things that have survived and they take it away to be cleaned. And so I tell the story in there about how for about 4 months we didn't have anything. Like they take it away, they clean it, and then I asked the guy when we were standing there, I'm like, hey, they're going to put all of our stuff into a truck. They're going to take it and clean it. And it's going to come back. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, I'm like, how long does it take to clean stuff? And because I was like thinking to myself, we have a hole in the roof, so I got to get that worked on. And then I'm looking around like, how long does it take to clean like pots and pans and all these things? He goes, oh, about 120 days.
Whoa.
And I was literally like, it was July, right? So July,
Oh my
August,
goodness.
September, October. I'm like, October. Like, I'm going to get my stuff back in October. And I remember thinking, like, that was like a bottom of life moment where you're just literally, I have little kids. What are we going to do for 4 months? And for me, that's how I got through these 5 minutes of joy when I remember like looking at like the just sheer grossness of what had burnt. And then it was like these few months of dealing with insurance companies. And then it was like, now we're trying to put our lives back together. Those 5 minutes of joy was really a game changer in terms of how do we take a really crappy situation and just infuse a little bit of happy here and there. And it's like a habit. Once you start it, it doesn't feel hard, but in that first few times, you might set the timer for joy for 5 minutes and sit there and kind of pout about it. But do it 3 to 5 times because by the fifth time, you're like, all right, fine. I'll walk around the block. All right, fine. I'm going to pour, we call it a Sprite special at our house where I pour like literally a can of Sprite Zero with some ice on it. And I have these like fun little straws. And literally, my kids know it as a Sprite special. And literally, you'll find yourself being like, all right, 5 minutes, I can make myself a Sprite special in between meetings. And so you start to just let your brain search for it. And it can happen, like I said, in the worst and the best of times.
Sounds like, hey, just go indulge yourself. Something small, but is meaningful
Yes.
for you. And then how do we take that from doing that for ourselves to encouraging the team to do it in a way that your Sprite special works for you, but it may not work for somebody else? So how do we encourage them to find that 5 minutes of indulgence or whatever the case is going to be to really take them over the top?
A lot of times I do a lot of searching first. Like I'm asking questions about how, like the specific and the preference. I'm like, what do you and your wife do for fun? And you're like, oh, we go to soccer games. And then I'm asking the next person, what do you guys do for fun? And they're like, I like to read. And I'm just kind of making mental notes of what people like. And then oftentimes I'm sending them things, whether it's email or even in person. I'll stop by their desk and like, hey, 5 minutes. You got 3 minutes? You got 2 minutes? I'm like, did you see that soccer game? And I jump into their joy and I'm taking the 3 to 5 minutes for them. If somebody loves to cook, I'm sending them a quick recipe via email and like, hey, if you got a minute, make sure you read this recipe. So good. And I'm just starting to invite the conversation between us to be about the thing that they enjoy. And then when we start to infuse it into like official moments where you have more of an official engagement strategy, then you can start to plan some activities related to that. Or sometimes it's just a matter of, hey, quick trivia question for the day. Who knows the answer? Email me back. And you'd be shocked at how many people in a 2 minute thing will actually engage with you. And if you're talking about the thing that they might like trivia question, which make it up person did this, which person invented that. People start to perk up. Our brains love pattern and they love surprise. And if you can just give them a glimmer of, oh, that was different, your brain kind of says, huh, okay, I'm not just in the get it done mode. I had a moment of thinking about this other thing. Okay, now I'm back to work.
So, Lisa, I don't want to put words in your mouth. It sounds as though you deliberately are a collector. And what I mean by collector, you're a different kind of collector. You get curious, you find out, I'll call it the rocket fuel, someone is really passionate about on your team, and you go out of your way behind the scenes without really saying anything to immerse yourself in the smallest of ways, perhaps in their world, so that when the what hits the fan with that person,
Yes.
you're going into your mental inventory. Hey, Jeffrey, what do you think about this? Or, yeah, I was watching that soccer game, whatever their rocket fuel is, you have something in your back pocket that you can pull them out of that. And I would imagine they're coming out of that. Not only are they feeling better, their admiration and respect for you must be through the roof if they think about it of, wow, I can't believe Lisa knew that or even thought to ask me that.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite things is like introvert versus extrovert.
Mhm.
I love to find out which of those are they or if they're a combination because I think that there are certain things like even from a joy standpoint their enjoyment or their way to fuel themselves
Mhm.
might look different. And so I even put like funny things where we were working on a really difficult project and I reserved a conference room and I
Mhm.
put a sign on it and I said, all the introverts, welcome. And I sent a message to my team like, hey, I know there's 8 or 10 of you out there working really hard today. For my introverts, just so you know, I have conference room B reserved for you. And like I would find them, like two or three of them throughout the day. They just needed a moment away and they were in there. And I didn't go in there because I'm not an introvert. I'm an extrovert. But it was
Mhm.
just a way of acknowledging the way that people found joy, but also the way that they needed to show up and process information. And
Mhm.
that kind of stuff goes a long way. And they kind of smiled and laughed of, you know me too well. I'm like, what can I say?
And not that everything's going to be a bed of roses all the time
Yeah.
in the workplace. When, as their leader, you are asking them to do something difficult, they will likely, yeah, I want to help Lisa. We're in a tough situation here. She's been there for me. I'm going to be here for them. And
Yeah.
that's very different than the mental chatter of, okay, she's my boss. I got to do this or I'm going to get fired.
Yeah.
There's a difference in the work output and in the
Yeah.
team performance. And so, Default Nation, if you're thinking, I don't have the time to do that for my team, I'm going to say to you, Default Nation, very nonchalantly, find the time.
Yeah.
Find the time because this is the rocket fuel for your team. It shows that you care. And I suspect the process of going through that, Lisa, you're getting to know them, your respect, your admiration for your team members, as you get to know them even more, they're no longer just a team member, dare I say, friend, maybe even view them
Mm,
as part of your family. We work so long with them. Often we see them more
yeah.
than our family to begin with anyways, that it both ways. You're learning about them, you're getting impressed, they're seeing how you care about them, they will walk to the ends of the earth. And I know there's always exceptions. And I'm
Yeah.
sure Default Nation, you have your stories. Yeah, I did that. And so, of course, there's always going to be exceptions. But by and large, I would imagine, Lisa, that this is part of your secret sauce that really gets the results.
I had a woman, she was on my team and I was a newer leader. She had been there like 35 years at the organization. I'm young, she's not. And it took me months and months. I'm just continually like keeping my emotions in check. She's being a turd every corner, every time we turn around. And it was funny because when I moved roles, I was out at a restaurant and a waitress brought me a drink and she goes, "Hey, this is from the lady down the way." And I was like, the lady down the way, this is odd. And so I look over and it's her. And she walked over and she goes, "I put you through hell." I said, "Maybe so." And she goes, "And I really wanted to hate you as my boss." I said, "Maybe so." And she looked at me and she goes, "But thanks for hanging with me." And we like toasted. And then the next week I moved into a different role within that organization. But it was one of those validating moments of I was below the surface, creating good ripple effect, even though she just to her core was like, I cannot, right, have this young leader who's energetic, doesn't know what. But I think that if you do it over and over again, just very quickly, quietly, people, even though they want to be like, it's really hard for them to be like, I couldn't, I like you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to hate someone when you like them.
Yeah, it is exactly. And that's what she like, her brain was telling her she should for all the
Yeah.
reasons that,
Yeah.
of this. But yeah, yeah.
Fascinating. Lisa, let me ask you this before we go into wrap up mode. I know there are so many questions I haven't yet asked. Is there a question that I haven't asked, or a topic, theme, or even a message we haven't covered yet that you'd
Ooh.
like to share with the Deep Wealth Nation?
I'm sure they're already doing this, but one of my favorite things is living in the lab is just running some different experiments. And so
Hmm.
if you don't have some fun or funny or unique experiments that you're running in your organization or your team, whether it's even like getting a little bit creative about your services if you're an entrepreneur or your offerings, like that would be my only other thing of get out there and live in the lab, run some experiments, try some things. And I tell my teams, I'm like, all right, we're running an experiment. We're going to try this. If it fails, scientists, what do we do? And it's saying like, we experiment to see what works. And so if there's something from maybe this conversation that you're thinking, gosh, I don't know if I can do it, run a little experiment and see what happens. And I always say run 3 or 4 just in case that first one, you're like, I had one bad time. I'm not doing that again. Run a couple of them,
Hmm.
but live in the lab, like big geeky goggles and a science speaker. Get out there and experiment.
Love that. Be curious and experiment and see what's out there and really put the judgments, the labels aside and look at it without that emotion part. I'm sure
Yeah.
that's where we see sometimes what we think is the worst possible thing is actually the gold that we're grateful for it. It puts us
Mhm.
into a better position. And Lisa, as you're talking about that, it's the perfect segue for us to go into wrap up mode. And it's a tradition here in the Deep Wealth podcast. It's my privilege and my honor where every guest I ask the same question. It's a fun question. Let me set this up for you. When you think of the movie Back to the Future, You have that magical DeLorean car that will take you to any point in time. So imagine now it's tomorrow morning. You look outside your window, not only is the DeLorean car curbside, this is the fun part,
Ooh.
Lisa. You're now going to hop in. You're going to go to any point in your life. Lisa, as a young child, a
Mm.
teenager, whatever point in time it would be, what are you telling your younger self in terms of life lessons or life wisdom? Or, hey, Lisa, do this, but don't do that. What would it sound like?
I'd probably go back to maybe my high school or even college self, and I would say, be sure to take life seriously and not seriously all at the same time. Like, you can't get hung up on in either spot for too long. There will be moments that you have to take serious, but don't forget that, like, you don't always have to, that you can do and be a little bit fun and curious. And if you do that, your life is going to be really rich. Really, when you talk about wealth, you're going to have a wealth of experiences and just a wealth of rich life.
Wow, I love that. So much in there. The gist of it is, hey, you'll have a rich life. Be curious. Get under the details. Just be curious. Don't take it too seriously. Your
Yeah.
biggest win or your biggest so-called loss, okay, fine, feel it, enjoy it, but move on with it.
Yeah.
Get curious, and you'll have the richest life. I absolutely love that. And speaking of a rich life, for those in the Deep Wealth Nation, they want you to come in and do a keynote for them or to advise them and their team of embedding this joy mindset into the culture or taking the leadership to the next level. Where would be the best place where they're going to feel your ripple effect? Pun intended, Lisa. Where would be the best place online that they can reach you and begin that conversation?
Yeah, lisaeven.com. So my first name, last name.com would be a great one. And then follow me on social media. I put out quite a bit of content and little tips and tricks about leadership, and some are funny and fun, and you will see results. So join me on that journey.
And Deep Wealth Nation, it doesn't get any better. And all this is in the show notes as a point and click. Well, Lisa, it's official. This is a wrap. And as we love to say here at Deep Wealth, may you continue to thrive and prosper while you remain healthy and safe. Thank you so much. So there you have it, Deep Wealth Nation. What did you think? So with all that said, and as we wrap it up, I have another question for you. Actually, it's more of a personal favor. Did you find this episode helpful? Have you found other episodes of the Deep Wealth Podcast empowering and a game changer for your journey? And if you said yes, and I really hope you did, I have a small but really meaningful way that you can actually help us out and keep these episodes coming to you. Are you ready for it? The dramatic pause. I'll just wait a moment. Drum roll, please. Subscribe. Please subscribe to the Deep Wealth Podcast on your favorite podcast channel. When you subscribe to the Deep Wealth Podcast, you're saving yourself time. Every episode automatically comes to you. And I want you to know that we meticulously craft every one of our episodes to have impactful strategies, stories, expert insights that are designed to help you grow your profits, increase the value of your business, and yes, even optimize your post-exit life and your life right now, whatever you want that to look like. And every time you subscribe and a fellow entrepreneur subscribe, it's a testament to how together, yes, we are changing the social fabric of society. One business owner at a time, one liquidity event at a time. So don't let the momentum stop here. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast channel. You'll never miss an episode. You'll be the first to hear from the top industry leaders, the innovators, the disruptors that are really changing and shaping the business world. And maybe you're commuting, maybe you're at the gym, maybe you're taking a well-deserved break that we spoke all about on this episode. The Deep Wealth Podcast, it's your reliable source for the next big idea that could literally revolutionize your business. So once again, please hit that subscribe button, stay connected, inspired, and ahead of the curve. And again, your next big breakthrough moment, it might just be one episode away. Maybe it was even this episode. So all that said, thank you so much for listening. And remember, your wealth isn't just about the money in the bank. It's about the depth of your journey and the impact that you're creating. So let's continue this journey together. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for listening to this episode. And as we love to say here at Deep Wealth, may you continue to thrive and prosper while you remain healthy and safe. Thank you so much. God bless.